Hey guys, my name is xOctoManx and this is part 3 of my shop system tutorial. In the last part we were creating the item holder script and all the other things so they can actually talk to each other, and we were filling some data and created the prefabs for that. In this tutorial part we're going to create a connection to our buy button. I'm gonna show you this one just pretty quick. As you can see, every weapon has a price already. We just filled in the data, and of course we have the sprites in here. What we want to do is, when we are now pressing on that particular buy button for that particular weapon, we want to make sure that we decrement money from the amount we currently have, and also we want to make sure that we are updating the sprite depending on whatever the knife was or whatever the image is or the weapon is, so we can see this one. Also, we want to make sure that we are changing this price to be just a text like sold out, as you may have maybe remember of the preview. Okay, so that's what we're going to do in this part, so we can actually buy some stuff, unlock it, and make it usable. So about the usability, we're gonna go over and change some things later on here and there, but at first let's go and make this buy button in any way work. So we have several possibilities to do so. In the first part we are going over and create just a script which can hold our data. So go to your scripts folder, shop system folder, and create a new one of type C#, of course, and I just call this one buy button. If you want to have a sell button later on, you feel free to add this one. It's basically the same, just reversed, so you get your money back or half of the money and so on and so forth. But this is not part of this particular tutorial. So open up the buy button script in MonoDevelop or Visual Studio, whatever you're using like. I'm gonna zoom in a bit so you can see this one better. So what we do is, with that particular buy button, this will sit in our prefab item holder and directly on the buy button itself. So we're gonna drag this one in. So what we also want to have is, on that particular buy button is an on-click event. So when we are pressing on the button, that on-click event is going to fire. So we're gonna need a function which sits directly in that on-click event, so we can actually use or make use of whatever we're gonna do inside. So, but before we do that, we need to fill in some data to the buy button itself. So the first public variable in here is going to be of type int, and what it is actually the weapon ID, so the item ID in this case. So the buy button knows, okay, this particular button I am of type or basically of type weapon ID 1, for example. So when I press that button, I can compare, or actually go through the whole weapon shop and see what item or what shop item holder actually has the same weapon ID. So we can actually, depending on that ID, change all the sprites, make the price usable directly from the weapon shop. So we will read out the data by that particular ID when we are pressing on that buy button and make use of it. So we can actually go in and decrement inside Game Manager the price if we have enough money, of course. So we can use the request money, for example, in here. So we send in the amount and see if there is a returning true or false, and then we get something in return and say, okay, this is returning true, so we can actually decrement the amount directly in the Game Manager itself by using the reduce money function. Okay. So what we're gonna do is, for that, is at first we create a public function, of course, otherwise we are not able to use that in an on-click event, and we call this one just buy something. I don't know. Of course it's of type void, and call this buy weapon. I don't know, or just buy weapon. So when we are clicking on that particular button, we want to call that function. Let me just save this one and pretty quick go into Unity so you can see this one better. What we want to do is we open up our canvas once again where the shop system is inside. Open the shop panel. We go to our spacer in our grid and reactivate the item holder. If you don't have that inside again or anymore, make sure that you drag in your item holder directly into grid. So on item holder, we're gonna open this one as well. As you can see, there is a buy button, and here we have an empty on-click event. So what we're gonna do is at first, since we have saved the script already, I'm gonna go to the shop system itself, to the folder, and drag in buy button as a component of it. We don't care about the weapon ID because the system will fill in the correct data later on, hopefully. So when we are instantiating that, we want to fill in the correct weapon ID to that particular button. Also, what we want to make sure is when we're pressing on that little plus in here in the on-click event itself, we can actually drag in the same button because it has that particular script part. We go to buy button and choose buy weapon as our function we want to call. Don't forget to apply the changes to the prefab, so everything which is actually driven by the system, so every item holder, any copy of the item holder will actually get the same information and so on and so forth. So also when you're going to the prefabs folder again and you recheck that and you open this one up in here, checking buy button, as you can see it automatically has a buy button script, the connection to the buy button itself. And of course, it can call the buy button, the buy weapon function. Okay, so what we can do is actually, we have several things we need to take care of. At first, we want to click on the button and make sure that we're able to buy it. So in the later part, we're gonna go over and change also the text depending on if we are using a particular button on our actual weapon or not. That of course again depends on the weapon ID we currently have. So for that we of course need to fiddle around a bit in the weapon shop, but at first let's make use of weapon ID in weapon shop. So what are we doing pretty quick once again? When we are filling the list, we're gonna create the item holder object and get the component of the item holder script. We fill in the data for the item ID, the price and name, but we are not actually filling in data on that particular button. So the button actually which is holding all the weapon ID information. So what we do in this case is we need at first of course the connection to the buy button and find the script part where we can actually fill in the data for that particular buy button, and that's what we're going to do now. Okay, so what we have is actually we have the holder script, in this case of type item holder, and what we have in there is the connection to the game object buy button itself. So what we're gonna take is, or make sure that we have that inside, that the buy button as a game object is actually on our item holder prefab. I don't remember this one, so I'm gonna check this. As you can see, we already dragged in the buy button here, so make sure that you have that already, which is actually the same or part of the item holder itself. Okay, that's fine. So what we now can do is we can actually take that because we have the connection to it already, and yeah, take all the data we need. I'm gonna command this one out so we know, okay, that's just for the buy button itself. What we do is we say holder script dot buy button, so we have the connection already, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna get the component. Give me a sec, that's this way at first. So we get the component on it, and the buy button connection or the buy button component is actually the buy button script we just created 1 second ago, or a minute or two. So that's what we're taking as a component, and we check if this one is on it. So, and if it's the case, and in our case it is, we can do everything with that particular buy button on or in runtime. And what we want to do is we want to fill in weapon ID. And this weapon ID is going to be the same as a weapon ID in square brackets I.ID. Since we are still in the for loop, we are looping through all of the items, and we'll fill in the data directly from the weapon list into the buy button script component of buy button itself, which is a game object which holds the ID. So let's test this one out. Don't forget to save. And let's see if we are able to replicate or actually check if there is anything or everything is in there completely correct. So the first one is just our empty one. The second one, gonna scroll down a bit, open this one up and check the buy button itself. And when we are scrolling down, you can see it now has the weapon ID 1. If you're going to the second one and checking the buy button in here, you can see the weapon ID is 2. And of course, in the third one in the buy button, this is going to be of weapon ID 3. So what we did is actually we read the data from our shop system itself, and in here we have our weapon IDs. We just filled the data inside, and we just actually read out the data and publish the buy button with that particular weapon ID. So now we have the ID in our buy button itself, because we're just reading and pasting and pushing around the data back and forth as how we need them. We can actually make a test on the buy button. So when we're pressing, this is our on-click event, or just on-click, when we're pressing that button, we want to make sure that weapon ID is not equal to 0. So this is just a debugging state. So if we want to test if there is any weapon ID coming in or not. If there is nothing because there's any problem or whatever, we just return. We don't do anything with that particular function. We can return 0 at any time and so on. So if that weapon ID is going to be equal to 0 because I don't know why ever, we want to return and we want to get a debug line like, I don't know, weapon ID is not set or something like that. So what we tested first is, so if the weapon ID is equal to 0, then we want to return. And of course, before we're gonna return just means we just exit the row statement. Or the row function. When we are returning, we want to get a debug line like debug.log. You can also print a message or whatever you please like, or log an error. No weapon ID set. Okay, so with that we can just easily later on check if something went wrong or the weapon ID got lost on the way between the weapon shop instantiation of the weapon buttons and so on and so forth, or I don't know, we lose a connection in the prefab or whatever. So we're gonna return when this one is 0, because 0 is nothing and nothing is not interesting for us. So when we have a weapon ID, we want to make use of it and of course check what we can actually do and want to buy a weapon. So at first we need to go and iterate through the whole weapon shop list and see where is the same ID in the weapon list, and what can we do with that list. We have two possibilities for this. At first we can do that directly inside the button, or we call a function directly in weapon shop, so we don't need to get any components and so on. We still don't need so. But we can actually get something in return, like information for that particular button, or we do everything directly in here. So we could create a buy function directly in the weapon shop itself and make everything in here, like changing the graphics, sprites and so on, or we do that directly on the weapon button. That's up to you. But since we have a state on that particular button, we want to make sure that the weapon we try to buy is not bought already. And if it's bought already, then we want to change the text and actually make a different use of it. So what we do is we can, again, as I told you before, create a function directly in weapon shop, or we do that in here. And actually, I don't think it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter actually. So what we do is we want to iterate through the weapon shop list itself. So we say for int I is going to be equal to 0, and while I is smaller than, and now we come to the static part. So we have directly access to the weapon shop itself. Is weaponshop.weaponshop, and now we want to see where the list is. It's going to be the weapon list, and we want to have the length of the weapon list. So it's weapon list.count. So while I is smaller than the length of the weapon list itself in the shop system, we want to increment I. So we say I plus plus. So, and while we are looping through, we want to check again 3 things. The first one is we want to match the weapon ID. So while we are looping through, we want to make sure that the weapon ID is matching the same, the weapon ID which is stored in the weapon list itself. So if that is the same as that, only then we are able to go forward. So if now we need to do that the whole time once again. So if the weapon shop.weapon list, gonna copy this part in here because I'm lazy today. It's square brackets, and in this case, of course, it's I, because that's the item we are currently in or looping through. And dot weapon ID is going to be equal to the weapon ID we currently have on that particular button or button script. Only then we want to go forward. Now we have again 2 possibilities. We can ask for the next if statement directly in the next line or in the same one. I believe I go and do 3 under or the next just inside, and after that we can actually place everything in the same line with an AND. So if this and another condition is true or false or whatever, then we go forward. So I do that for you in a second line, so a second if statement inside the first statement. So if this is true, we want to make sure that this is also be true or false, depending on what we are requesting. So we're gonna take the same part in here once again, copy this one over. So if the weapon shop, the weapon shop.weapon.I.bot is not going to be true. In this case, we can say if it's going to be the same as false, we can the second one is we can make an exclamation mark directly in front of it. It's going to say the same. It's not going to be bought. So bought is going to be equal to false, or just use an exclamation mark directly in front of it. It's going to say the same. So we don't have, or we haven't bought that particular weapon already. Then we want to make sure that the next if statement, we want to make sure that we have enough money in our game manager, in our currency system. So if we're gonna paste the same stuff once again. So if weapon shop.weapon list dot in square brackets I dot, and now we need the price, which is a weapon price, is going to be smaller or equal to, and now we go to the game manager object or game manager script. So game manager dot, and in here we gonna request the money. Request money. There's a function we created beforehand, and what we now want to do is we need to fill in the amount of what we are requesting, and in this case it's going to be the same as here, like that. So but what we don't need to do is we don't need to do that, because this is returning true or false, because it's going to get us back a boolean. So we can take this away and we just say if game manager requests money, so this is going to return something like true or false, but nothing in between. So we don't need to compare this this with that, so we just need that one line. So, and if this is going to return true, so gonna show you this one pretty quick once again. So we request an amount of money, and if this requested money amount is smaller than the money we have actually in here in our private serialized field, which is of type float, only then we're gonna get a return true, and that's what we want. We just want to have a true or false, and that's what Boolean is about. And when this is the case, all of those three are able to be are actually the same, or whatever their conditions is. We don't, or we haven't bought this particular weapon. We are in the same weapon ID, and the price is at least the same as whatever it has to be, or the money inside the game manager itself. Then we go over and buy it, because we are currently clicking on that buy button, and this is going to happen in here. So if all those three if statements are going to be true or false, depending on what their condition is, we're gonna buy the weapon at that particular point. Okay, and so now that we know that we have that three if statements and conditions we can also do everything in one line. So we can say an and, so it's two of that and signs. I'm gonna copy this part, this line, completely behind the first statement. So what that means is if that is true and that is true, so that means if that is not being bought, and after that we can place in another and we can copy this line of code in here. Gonna copy and paste that directly behind the second and. It's going to be a rather long line, but what we do is we actually we don't just save some lines of code, but what we do is we have the possibility to easily make an else if statement behind that. So if one of that is not going to be the case, like, okay, the weapon for example has been bought already, then we can act or react to that particular piece at that particular point. Okay, so let's assume we have found the right ID, we haven't bought that weapon already, and we have enough money. What we're gonna do is at first we want to set the weapon shop and update it, of course, to whatever we need to do. So when we have that, we're gonna copy this one once again. What we do is at first we want to take that particular weapon and set this board to be true. So we set, we want to make sure that this is going to be true. So the weapon is going to be set to be true. What we also want to do is we want to reduce the money from the game manager. So we say game manager dot reduce money by whatever the amount is. So we take that. And what is the amount of money? It's of course weapon shop dot weaponlist dot I dot, and in here we have the weapon price, like that, and gonna place that in a bracket, of course, and make or end the line. So the next one is we usually also, I'm gonna explain that pretty quick once again. Once we have bought that with the button, the price shield in here needs to be changed to be sold. Also, the money text needs to be updated. So I'm not sure if we have that already in the game manager itself, but when we're reducing money, oh yeah, we have that already. We're gonna update the UI, and in this case, it's going to be our money text is going to be updated with the correct stuff inside. So let me show you what we have done, and then we go forward pretty quick. So I press on play. When I use that by script in here on the first one, we're gonna get a reference, or actually we get a no weapon ID set, and it's going to return. So we are not able to buy something where the ID is 0. So that's why we haven't touched that particular button in here. So you can see this is a weapon ID 0. We return nothing and everything is cool. Nothing else will happen. So when I press on that buy button, you're gonna see this is updating our money, as you can see. And also we are not able to buy that once again because we already have bought this one, and in our shop panel in our weapon list you can see it automatically updated the bought sign in here, that boolean. When you're going to do that with an army knife, it's going to happen the same. It's automatically updating, okay, you are not able to buy this one once again. And we can do the same with a katana. So we press on that, we're gonna reduce 10k in weapon price, and we're gonna get that bought already. So if this is in here, you are not able to buy any of that weapons once again. And the first one, of course, always returns a no weapon set because this is just our testing prefab. Okay, so now you are able to buy that particular one of that particular weapons at any time when you're able to do so, also when you have enough money. Let's assume, let's go to the game manager itself, and I'm gonna reduce the money for or to maybe 800. So let's say we only have 800 in our account, as you can see right now. So the first one, the knife, yeah, sometimes or somehow the names in here are a bit off. Don't know why. Gonna check that in just a second. I don't know what happened. Okay, somehow the prefabs are completely wrong in here, or I don't know. Gonna check that in a second. So what you can see is now we only have 800 in currency. So when I press on the knife, I'm able to buy that. As you have seen, we don't get any errors or something. And now we're not able to rebuy that once again because in the shop panel itself, as you can see, it's already bought. But when I now press on that knife and press on buy, we are not able to do so because we don't have enough money. And since we don't have enough money, it's not going to be bought, but you want the user to know, hey, you don't have enough money, because so you're not able to buy this. So we want to pop up an image or a message or whatever directly on screen, so the user knows, okay, he is not able to buy that, I need to show him that. Or maybe make something, an effect which is showing that. So it depends on how you want that and how you like that to be. Gonna recheck pretty quick what I have, what actually happened to my layout in here. Gonna be back in a second. Okay, don't ask me why. Script wise, what we're gonna do is currently we are filling the list with our game objects of type holder or with the name of holder of type game object. We instantiate that item prefab or the item holder prefab inside grid. But what we don't do is we are not telling it in what the world space or local space is going to happen or should happen. So let's see if I find the option in here pretty quick, like this one. As you can see, a bool of world position state, I believe that's this one. Or instantiate in world space. Yeah, that's it. So we're gonna instantiate that in world space or not. So we need to return or actually pass over a bool. So if you have that scaling, that weird scaling, usually we have a scale of 111, but this one what I just had automatically scaled to 1.6 whatever, I don't know. So what we want to say is we want to have or pass over a false inside of that instantiate line. I'm sorry for this, but that is usually the case because when something is too big. Because of the world space. So now it should be fixed and everything should be fine once again. Yep, as there we go. As you can see, everything is cool already. So this is about the scale. So if you have any weird scales on your actually created item holder objects and they are overflowing like that, as you have seen before, then make sure that you add that false in the part of the instantiating stuff in the item holder game object. Okay, so with that done, we can actually go in and pass over some more data or actually update everything in the user interface so the user know, okay, I have bought this one, so we can change our sprite, for example. So in that case, we're going over to our weapon shop system where we have our sprite stuff inside already. But we'll create a new function for this one of type void once again. It needs to be public, so we have access from outside to that particular function. And I call this one just update sprite. And what we need is, of course, the information of type int. And it's going to be the weapon ID. So we have the possibility to change for that weapon ID. So as I said before, I believe in the first part, the ID is actually what we need, or what is actually driving the complete system, or mostly. Oh, there's a small typo. So what we do is when we have that, we pass over the weapon ID from the buy button itself, and then we go in and loop through the complete weapon list. But the problem is we are not able to do so since we already instantiated that item holder. We don't have access to it directly. So what we actually need is we need an extra list where all that holder objects are inside. So we have access directly through them, and we get the component out of them because they already exist. Otherwise, we would need to try to find any way wherever the item holder object is. So also, we want to make sure that we're not using sprites directly, but we go in and use the resources folder, as I explained before, and I will go over into that in a second as well, to update all the images directly from that resources folder, so we are able to serialize the data later on. Otherwise, we are not able to do so. Okay, so first things first, let's create that list at first. So it's going to be a public list. You can also, well, no, it does not need to be a public list. It can be a private list. You can do that public if you like to, but you don't need to. So it's of type game object, since what we save in that is just that holder game objects in here. That's just a holder list. You can, or item holder list, however you please and like. As I said before, item holder list, but in this case you may know that one better. It's a new list. Where is it? List of type game object, brackets, close the line. Okay, so we gonna pass over all the data in the item holder list when we are instantiating them. It doesn't matter where you do that inside, but it needs to be after the line of the game object itself. So maybe we're gonna do that directly under the button stuff in here, maybe like that. So handle lists. Okay, so when we're handling the list, it's just nothing specific or nothing too big actually. We just say item holder list dot add, and what we add is of course something of type game object, as you can see also in the description in here, and in our case it's just the holder, the instantiated holder. And that's pretty much it for that handling list, for that particular list. So now when we are updating the sprite, we need to go to that item holder list, so we are able to update everything what's inside. So at first we go through the item holder list and we request the item holder script, which is actually directly on it, and then we can compare all the data with the particular item IDs. So again, we're gonna create a new for loop in that. So for brackets int I is going to be equal to 0, because we start and the item list of 0 actually, or on the item element actually. So it's int I is going to be equal to 0, and while I is smaller than, and now we need the list, which is item holder list dot count, which is the size once again, and we increment I while we are going through that. Now what we want to take is actually the holder script from that particular holder item we are going through, and react to that. So what we can do is item holder list in square brackets I dot get component. We need the component out of it, which is of type item holder, and now we can do something with that while we are going to take that, but we need to cache that info pretty quick. So what we say is item holder, just call this one holder script. Once again, the name doesn't matter at that particular point. It's going to be equal to item holder list in square brackets I dot get component, the item holder component. So now we can just say holder script dot whatever we have found in there, and we can react to that. And in this case, we're gonna need to check where the sprites and all the other things are. So at first, when we are in the item holder script, we want to make sure that if holder script dot and here we need the ID, the item ID in this case is going to be equal the same as the weapon ID we were passing in beforehand, which is this one. When we have that and this is returning true, which means we actually have found the correct game object to update the correct item sprite, then we are able to do so. We are able to update them when we have found the correct weapon ID, which hopefully matching then. When we are at that point, then we need to create an extra or a new nested, that's called nested for loop inside the for loop we are currently in. But since we are still in the for loop, we are not able to use I. In this case, we're gonna use any other letter or whatever you please and like. In my case, it's going to be J. So J is starting at 0 as well, and while J is smaller than, and now we go to our weapon list. Dot count, so it's inside of that. We're gonna increment J. And of course we make sure that we anchor this one or do some brackets around it. In here we want to check now if the weapon list item we are currently looping through is the same as the weapon ID we're passing over, so we can mix and match, or actually just match the holder script item ID with the weapon list item ID, so we can load in the correct sprites at the particular point. So what our request is, or with the next statement is, if the weapon list in square brackets J dot item ID or weapon ID is going to be equal to the weapon ID we are passing in, like this. So now, only if that is the case, we are able to react to whatever we have sent it in, and we can update the correct sprite for the correct holder script. Or actually, we load in the correct info at that particular point. Also, at that particular point, we could also request if the weapon at this point already has been bought. We can use this. I believe we're not able to, or we don't need to, but I will just enter this possibility. So what we want to make sure is that the weapon is J dot bought is going to be true. So only if the item has been bought, then we want to react to it. So we have the correct weapon ID, which is matching in the list. Once we found that, we want to check if this has been bought. So we don't do the exclamation mark. We can also say it's going to be equal true, but actually we don't need to. That just is enough. We just request or get a return of true or false in this case. In this case, again, we are requesting true. So if this is true, then show me the correct image. And when it comes to images, as I said before, we're gonna have to change the system slightly from going directly into sprites and using the resources. Well, basically the base is going to stay the same, but instead of passing over a bought sprite, we're gonna send in a sprite depending on the name from the resources folder, as I already explained in the very beginning. Don't forget to save the script at that point, and let's go and do that at first. Okay, so what we do is, again, create a resources folder. If you don't have that, then create this one. You need that folder. It needs to be big R and then resources. Also, in that, I created a sprites folder. You don't need to, but if you have a lot of other external or semi-external resources you want to read from, then you might have some other images and stuff which you might want to pass over in other subfolders in the resources folder. It doesn't matter how deep it is. It's just important that it is at that point, or that it is available. So as I said before, do not create a weapon atlas. That would be another way actually of creating that stuff. Make sure that you export the black and the colored images on their own and rename them accordingly when you import them, or make sure that you rename them inside or whatever, or just when you're exporting them from whatever program you are using, make sure you use underscores in between, just to make sure nothing is going to get wrong. Okay, so what we're gonna have is, I have a texture. I changed just the texture type to 2D, so I have the transparency in the background. You can use it or not, depending on what you like and need. And of course, the mode or the sprite mode is going to be single. Everything else is fine for now. If you need to work around with the compression and need to go into true color, if you're going mobile, then you might want to change the quality system and itself and everything else you need at that point. If you don't need that, then just leave it alone or copy whatever I have in here. Also, so what I do is I create a name called army_knife, and the next one is army_knife_black. So I have a difference in the name. Make sure everything mix and match. If you have something like _black at all the black ones, you can reuse that. Later on I'm gonna explain that in a moment. Or you can just type it out. So what we do is, what we want to have is we want to have all of them on their own. So only those representing all their names. Why is that so? We are not able to directly read in the data from a texture atlas. That's a bit complicated because, well, all the sprites are in here, but we are not able to directly access them inside that weapon atlas. So what we would need to do is a complete different workaround, let's say workaround, to get all the information from the correct sprites in that, well, base sprite or basic sprite or whatever it's called, or actually the sprite atlas. So make sure everything is exported like this one. So everything, has its own name and is a graphic on its own or a sprite on its own. Okay, once you have all of that stuff done and renamed correctly, so like Katana and Katana Black, we're gonna change our system a bit. So as you know from the beginning, we just created a shop panel in here and we dragged in the onboard sprite and the board sprite. That's what we need to change right now because, again, later on when we're trying to save the weapon list itself, we want to take the whole system as it is, and I don't want to go in and exclude sprites and so on. Then we lose the connection. We are not able to fit all of that stuff. We could read the data a bit different, but we would also need to make sure that we refill the data later on, depending on what has been saved. We could also, I believe, take the names of that, but actually, that's for me too complicated, I believe so. If it's not, then feel free to do so. Anyways, we are not able to use sprites. But what we can save in that particular moment is, or actually what we can serialize, are strings. So what we do is we take the name of the onboard sprite and the name of the board sprite, and then we fill in the data to whatever we know of. Of course, we need to take care that we don't have any typos, and then we load the resources or the sprites directly out of the resources folder and fill in the data into the weapon list, or actually on instantiation in our item holder prefab. I hope you understand what I mean. I'm gonna fix my screen for a second and we'll be back. So the first step we're gonna do is we go to our weapon class, and as you can see currently we are using the sprites inside, and of course we made sure that it is serializable. Again, we are not able to serialize sprites, so we need to have a workaround, and the workaround I'm gonna comment those out so you can later on know what's working on that particular point. What we can do is we can actually rename them, or actually use, instead of sprite, we can use just strings, and that's what we're going to do. Of course, they will be public as well. They are of type string, so we can actually just rename them or just use a name for the item sprites. I know it's a lot of work later on to fill in the list if you have 1000, I don't know how many items. Maybe you have another workaround, but currently I just use this one. So, because you might not have more than 10 or 15, so it's pretty much just copy and paste stuff around. So, and what we can do is we can rename that like onboard sprite name, for example. So we know this sprite is going to be loaded in the onboard sprite slot, but we'll only name or use the name of the onboard sprite. Well, basically we are not filling in sprites anymore, but we use strings. So what I do now is I copy this line of code, and of course we have a board sprite name, and I'm gonna save that. Also, when we are looking for problems right now, we will easily notice where we have problems now, because onboard sprite or board sprite are not even existing anymore. We can do that by pressing F7 and mono develop. So it will building the whole area, and what you get is an information, hey, in our weapon list, which is of type weapon, there is no board sprite, and that's where we need to make a change to the correct resources stuff. So what we do is in our weapon and all the in our item image actually dot sprite, we want to load in the resource depending on the board sprite name. So what we at first do is we're gonna need access to the resources folder, and that's pretty much easy because it's built in Unity or actually in C#. Not sure if that is Unity only. But what we can do is we can say resources. And what we can do is we can load different resources at that point. And as you can see, it loads something of a type. There are different ways again to do so. In my case, I just use that angled brackets. I don't know how they are called, doesn't matter. And what I'm looking for is the type sprite. So I load a resource from the resources folder of type sprite. And what I now need to do is I need to make sure that I take the correct folder, and in this case, which is the string path, it is the folder sprites. That's where I just pressed them or did them or created them in. So gonna rename it correctly. Don't forget to have no typos, and also make sure that you have that backslash or slash, I don't know, slash I believe. So we know, okay, this is the end of the last folder. If you have a deeper folder structure, then make sure that you also fill in the correct data. Do not use the resources folder as a name inside or actually at the path of the sprite string. So when we're going back and see in the resources, you don't need to make sure that this is the resources folder in this case. Ignore the error messages in here. But you need to make sure that the first folder in here is inside or listed inside. If it's not inside the sprite subfolder or a subfolder, I don't know, it's just in resources, I believe you don't need to type in anything, or maybe just that slash. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe something in that case. So, since we have to tell what is the correct path and where is the correct sprite we're gonna need, or the sprite name we want to load as a resource, we need to say plus. So we add that as a string. But as you can see, board sprite is still not accessible, but the board sprite name is. So what we have now is a complete path with the correct name of the data file. It doesn't matter whatever it is, a PNG, blah, 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 I don't know. It's something internal. We don't care about that currently. So we load the resource of type sprite. You can also typecast it, it doesn't matter. In the folder or in the subfolder of resources of is called sprite, or sprites in my case, plus the weapon list we're currently looping through anyways, dot the board sprite name. And now you already can think about what it's going to do, or what we need to do in the second one is actually going to be about the same. but just the onboard sprite name in the later part. So we're just gonna go and change this one to onboard sprite name. Don't forget to save the changes, and we will be checking again if everything is in here and if we have any errors. And as you can see, the errors are now gone. But what we need to do is we now need to fill in the sprite name data inside the weapon shop script in our inspector of the top panel. So that's what we're going to do next. The first one is onboard sprite name for our kitchen knife. And in my case, it's called chef_knife. And since it's the same name but with _black behind, we could actually get rid of one of them if we like to, and just read the data from just the sprite or from just one sprite. If you have a system like that, I'm gonna show you both ways, I believe so. So what we do is we type in chef_knife. So that's the sprite name. I'm not sure if this is able to drag in. Just, oh no, it's not. Okay, so usually what we could do is we could just and since it's an onboard sprite, we're gonna say it's going to be the black one. So chef knife _black, gonna copy that, paste that in the board sprite, and the board sprite is just a chef knife, the unlocked one, the colored one. So, and what we also could do, well, in this case we just fill in all the data, but we could also do something inside here. What we could do is we can just say we just have a sprite name, a base sprite name. Gonna change that for a second. It's up to you how you want to do that. So we just have a sprite name without board or onboard. I'm gonna copy that pretty quick, just in case. And comment the old ones out and just have a sprite name. Let's assume we just have one sprite name. Gonna save that, and when we're going back to the shop system again, this will be red, so it means it's not existing, but sprite name exists. And same here, we can just say sprite name. But what we also can do is with a plus underscore whatever, we can add more strings. And since we have the same system, we always all our onboard sprites have _black inside, we can automate the second option. So what I mean with that is, in here we're gonna make sure that something has been bought. So this is a colorist name, so we don't need to change anything. But what we want to do in the onboard one, we add just another extra string with _black behind it. So what we now do is we're gonna go into the folder, load the sprite name, which we need to fill out at least, and then we add _black to the onboard sprite one. Let's check this one out right now. We're gonna wait until this has been loaded and updated because it needs to recompile all the things. Okay, there we go. So here we have the sprite name, and what we have is the sprite name actually, and we only need to fill in one data, like, okay, this is chef_knife, and there we go. And we can do the same for the army knife, so it's army_knife. Again, make sure that I believe it's case sensitive, so make sure everything is written correctly. And in here we just have the katana. Okay, so now I have all that 3 data inside. Let's see what the system is going to do with that. We're gonna press play. And once it's done, you can see it still loads the correct images directly from the resources folder instead of having the sprites in the system. And now, since they are not bought, we'll actually don't have any colorist stuff inside. But when I say this one and this one has been bought already and start the system again, they should be colored. As you can see, we just type in one name, and once the board is going to be set, we automatically load if it is colored or not. So it takes the data directly from the resources folder in the subfolder of the sprites and loads the correct data, or actually in this case a correct image or sprite for this. Pretty cool. So what we now have is a semi-dynamic way of loading the sprites. We just need to have have to input just one name for the sprite, for the base sprite actually, and the rest is going to be driven by the system because we say everything else is _black in the back, so we don't have to change anything inside. And that's what we're also using in updating the sprites. That was the last one we are working on when we're pressing on the buy button. So what we do is, when we're going through that update process, because we are clicking on the buy button, we want to call the weapon shop update sprite, so we get the correct sprite in runtime when we're pressing on the buy button. That's what we're going over and do next. So what we actually do is basically the same as we have done here. If the weapon list.board has been, or the weapon in this particular list at that particular point has been bought, we update the image. And we do the same in here, but instead of I, we're gonna use J. So actually, what we can do is we just copy all of that stuff over and paste this one in here. And instead of J, I, as I said, we're gonna change this one to J. So since we are in the J loop in here, in the second loop. Also, what we can do is we update the text in the holder script to have the correct pricing or price data inside. So holder script, and then again we can see it wherever we are at that particular point. And the holder script has the item image, as we see, the buy button, and somewhere is, I believe, the price text, the item price. And what we want to change is the text of it. And we want to change this one. When we have bought that one already and we are updating the sprite, we also can update the text. And what I do is I say sold out and maybe an exclamation mark. Don't forget to end the line with a semicolon. Okay, so what we now do is we update the sprite depending of if it is bought, else or not. If it's not bought, again it still stays the black version of whatever we have in here. And we also update the sold out text, so we are not able to buy this one. So we also want that the player knows, okay, we are not able to buy this one once again and anymore. So how can we do that actually, or actually how are we able to update the sprites right now? Well, since it's a public function which requests just a weapon ID, we can actually call that after we are done with buying the item directly from the button, from the buy button script. So what we do is we click on buy on the buy button itself. We call that from an on-click event, as we already have as a note in here. We're gonna check if there is a weapon ID. If not, we don't do anything, but if there is any, then we want to check for particular parts, like is there the weapon ID, has this one be bought already, and do we have enough money? And if we have so, and we are done with controlling all this part after the for loop, and I believe we are also able to do that directly in the for loop, but we better do that at the very end once the for loop is completed with everything and updating everything as it has to do. Then we want to make sure that we call the function directly in the weapon shop.weaponshop.update, right? And what we pass over is the weapon ID which is sitting directly on weapon on the button itself. So we take this weapon ID and pass this one over to the weapon shop and make sure that it's updating the sprite when we are pressing on that. Don't forget to save the buy button, and let's head back to Unity and test it out. Also then we are able to see if our text is also updating directly inside. So it is still loading everything in black. We don't have, or we haven't bought anything, and we are only currently able to buy the kitchen knife. Gonna press on the buy button, and instantly it's updating, of course, the game manager. It says, okay, this weapon has been sold out, and we're changing the graphic from the black one to the colored one. Pretty cool. So basically the system has been done. Now what we can do is, or what actually the pattern has been requested is, that we are using this buy button to change the weapon on our character. I don't go directly over and do the stuff on the character. I just can show you the system, what's behind that, and gonna implement that as well. So once we have bought that, we want to make sure that this text is changing to be use or using. In this case, it maybe goes over and automatically change it to use, but also we want to pass over the data to whatever our current weapon system is, and pass over the weapon ID or the name or whatever you please and like. You have two possibilities. Again, you can use a sprite name as a weapon name or whatever, or you can use the ID we have. Also, you're able to pass over more data if you or actually use a weapon name in that case. It doesn't matter for you or for me actually. You have three possibilities to just pass over inside your weapon system, in your weapon change system. If you have something like that, yeah, feel free to use that information and change the ID on that on button click when we are in that use or using part. So that's what we are going to do next, which is not pretty hard, but we need to think about what actually is driving the system. Is it the system, or is it the button itself, or is it our weapon shop, or where can we have all the information from the buttons, for example? Well, that question or the answer actually is the same as we do with the item holder list. We're gonna store all the data in item holder list, go through that list, and then we are able to access the part. As we do in updating the sprites. So we're gonna do the same with the buy buttons. We can store all the buy buttons inside a list, and then we have directly access to it. We're gonna check for the weapon ID directly on that particular button, and then we update all the buttons at once when we're pressing one of that buttons, because we're looping through that complete list. So everyone who is not having that weapon ID, which is currently requested, is having another text like use or using. So when it's not having that, it's going to be use. So the player is able to change it to whatever it is. And using is the current actually clicked one, like the weapon ID. But we also need to take care of that the weapon has not been bought already. And yeah, that's what we're going to do now, I believe. I just think about what can we do. We can do it the same as we have done with the buy button, so we can actually take the whole system and use it directly in the weapon shop as a new function. We do everything internally, or we can do all of that stuff directly on one button with the one we are currently just clicking, and just calling that one after we are done with with filling, or actually with buying the data or whatever. Or you can actually use an else if statement directly behind it. So if we already have bought that system, so it's going to get in the next statement, so this is not going to be true, then we can say else if the weapon ID is same but has been bought already. Then we can say we're gonna change the text directly on the button. Again, at this step we're gonna need to go back to the weapon shop and update all the other infos about all the buttons currently existing. We're gonna pass another handle list actually again for the buy button. So I'm not 100% sure what's the best way in here, but either way is going to work. So I don't know what I'm going to do. Gonna give me a second and then we'll be back and we're gonna go forward. So at first, let's go and plan ahead for all the other statements in that particular for loop. So when I am clicking on that particular button and I have the money, I just easily buy that for the particular money, and the money gets decreased from our game manager or our currency system. So, but in the case we don't have any money, so else if, we wanna recheck everything once again as well, but with the difference that we're not getting, or that the request to the game manager is not the same, so we get a false in this case. So I'm gonna copy the whole if statement. Again, you may remember we just shortened this one, or actually just passed over everything in one line. So just going again through it pretty quick. So if the ID is matching the button ID we're gonna have, and we don't, or we haven't bought that particular weapon at that particular point, and we request money, but request money is not returning true but false. So we're gonna apply an exclamation mark in the front. So this is not going to return true but false. So yeah, we get something like, okay, you don't have enough money at that point. So that's the second else statement, or the second statement in the if statement actually. So what we want to do is, in the first place, we can just say debug.log, so we can debug everything at first, and later on pass over an information screen or whatever. I have showed you one in the very beginning. We can say not enough money. So we don't have enough money at this particular point because, yeah, it is like that. So we can debug that. And we get that in the console, so make sure it's always open. Gonna save pretty quick and go into the weapon shop once again. And I want to make sure that I'm not able to buy the container and get the debug line or whatever. It's not in the price. So I'm still able to buy this one, but I cannot say buy this once again because I'm sold out. But when I try to buy the army knife, then I should get not enough money because this is returning false. Because we don't have enough money, of course. So we can, instead of getting that debug line, can showing a panel, a text, a warning, or whatever you please and like. I'm going to show you one way after we are done with the button design itself, and then we're going to fill in any data or show any images or whatever. I don't know. I will believe we just create a quick panel or anything. I don't know. Maybe like I just created in the very beginning. Okay, so this is going to work, but we also want to make sure when we have already bought the weapon, now it comes to the place or the part where we want to update the text directly on the button and go through everything. We're gonna say else if again, because it's not just an else, because we have a bit different, once again, a bit different conditions in here. So again, we want to make sure that we're checking for the correct weapon ID, and we want to make sure that we have bought that already. So if the item has been bought, or the weapon or whatever it is, then we want to do something different. So we don't want to just get a debug line in this case, but we could. So we are able to switch stuff inside. We can pass over data to our currently existing or even not system, creating system, a weapon system or whatever, the change system when it is existing. Then we are able to pass over the data at this particular point. So like, I can still debug that. You can debug everything at any point. You just need to know where you want to place it. Has been bought already. So we can pass over data at that point. I'm gonna demonstrate this pretty quick so you can see all the three conditions are going to be able to work. So I have enough money for the first one. I still am not able to buy the army knife because we get not enough money information. But when I click on the kitchen knife once again, you can see it has been bought already because the item has been bought and the weapon ID matches to the button. Okay, and at that point when we can say, okay, we have bought that already, we want to say when we're clicking on that button, we want to make sure that we're using this weapon only when it has been bought already. So again, we can outsource that stuff, or we can do that internally inside button, but still we need to go to the weapon shop and add all the buy buttons to a buy button list. And this again is of type game object, as we have done with the item holder list. So it's just a placeholder for the button itself. So gonna create a new private list of type game object. It's going to be our buy button list. Oh, no typos. And it's going to be a new list, of course, of type game object, brackets, and close the line with a semicolon. And what we also want to do is when we are in fill list and we are handling different lists, we just want to add the particular buy button we currently have on, as you can see here. We have the component already. We can just add that that button directly into the list. So what we need to do is, I believe we need to catch the button for a second before we actually able to do that. Well, actually, that's what we are. We actually have the connection directly in the holder script. I see that here, so we don't need to catch that information again. So what we can do is we can just say, now we gonna take the buy button list dot add, and we want to add holder script. We are currently looping through, of course, dot, and then the buy button we have in here. And the buy button inside of holder script is going to be of type, of type game object. So this is not a secondary, or we don't need to do anything else. We actually have that component directly in holder script, as you can see here. We just got the component, so we just add the button directly from the holder script because it has the information about it already. Okay, so now we are able to loop through the buy button list, and we have access to all the text elements on the buy button, to all the script components on the buy button, and so on and so forth. And that's what we are going to use after this particular point, or pretty much at the same time when we are inside that for loop, or at that particular item. So what we do is we can, well, this is again a can, you don't have to, but we are able to. We can create a new internal function on every button, as I will go over and do right now. So it's just of type void, and we call this one maybe update, call it whatever you like, buy button, for example. It doesn't matter. And in that update buy button, we're gonna loop through the whole weapon shop buy button list and take the correct info and change the correct info depending on whatever the weapon ID is. And that's pretty much easy. The first one, what we can do is we can directly create a text component on that particular buy button, or actually, that's pretty much a cool idea. So we just need to drag in that one in our prefab, in our item holder prefab. This is going to be of type text, but usually we are not able to use text components directly wherever we are, so we're gonna add using UnityEngine.ui. So we have access to text components. It's also going to be with a big T like this, and what we want to have is the, I don't know, what can we call that, just button text maybe. So this is just a text component. We're gonna have to drag in our item holder prefab, so which is directly on the buy button itself. So I go to my spacer once again, into my grid, gonna activate my item holder, which is just my placeholder here. Go to the buy button, and here we have the button text component. And on the button itself, we have that text. That's the buy, what's currently in here. We want to change that text to using, or still keep it on buy. Usually, or at the base, it's going to stay buy, except we are updating this one. Okay, so when we have that, we go to the buy button itself. We drag its sub or child component of the button text. If it is directly on it, then just take this one and drag this one over. It's better to have it as a child because it might cause problems when it's losing connections because of the prefab stuff. If it's like bold text, make sure that you apply the changes When it's still that bold text, then you have to make a child of it. Yeah, when you're applying the changes, you will update the complete item holder object, so everything which is on it is automatically updated as well. And yeah, make sure that you disable this one once again, or just get rid of it. It's your turn, and you decide what you want and what you like. Okay, so what we can do is, when we call update by button, we know that we have bought the weapon already. So what we can do is, because we have bought that already, we can change the text directly on the button. So what we can say is button text dot text is going to be equal to underscore, or no, in that in here, like a string, in a string called using, for example. So what does it mean? Automatically, when I press on a particular button, it will automatically set this one to be using. At that point, you also want to make sure that your weapon system gonna make a note in here for you. You have to change that directly in your system as well. Or actually, I cannot, because I don't have a system like that. You want to change the weapon on your character. Also, you want to update your weapon system. Depending on depending on your ID or your name or whatever you have in the system. If you use a string, then use a string name and change the string name, of course, in the weapon shop system itself to whatever it is. The best and easiest way I usually do is I use just IDs. So it's just a number, you know, okay, the weapon XYZ is just number of 20,000, I don't know, whatever, or maybe just of 5, the ID of 5. Then you make sure in your currently running weapon system, you're gonna change your ID to the ID of the weapon shop, or the one we just pressing on. Okay, so this is at that point. You need to do that, otherwise you will ruin your old system with my, let's say, my new system. Okay, so what I also want to do is I want to call this function once I have bought the item, or the item has been bought. So I want to update the buy button, depending on where I'm currently pressing on. Thanks for watching the tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Thumb this video up if you like it, and feel free to become my patron or donate by using PayPal to support me and my channel in the future. All links will be below in the description. See you in the next tutorial. Bye bye.